they use their microphones and that we would be able to accommodate what's required to get a quality live streaming episode. Councillors, it's the appropriate time to acknowledge country, as we always do at this time in a council meeting. The Shire of Esperance acknowledges the Noongar and the Naju people, who are the traditional custodians of this land and their continuing connection to land, waters and community. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and we extend that respect to other Aboriginal Australians today. We move into the agenda and the attendance. We have all councillors present. And we have an apology from Mr. Shane Burge. He is on leave, and I welcome Mrs. Felicity Baxter as our acting CEO for the present time. Thank you for taking that role on, Felicity, and so we deal with that accordingly. Apologies and notification of granted leave of absence. Is there any notification of granted leave of absence? Have you got a granted one, Councillor?
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to request a leave of absence from the 18th of September till the 16th of October. Thank you.
So you're seeking a leave of absence for that time. Right, thank you. Are there any other councillors that wish to notify a previous leave of absence?
Can I just ask a question? Those of us going to WA week, I don't think we need grant of absence, do we? Grant of leave?
No?
I'm not sure. I'll have to check on that.
I believe not, but maybe we do.
I just want to make sure.
Good
Thanks.
question. Okay. So if there's no other notification of granted leave of absence, that means you've had it before and you just want to remind the meeting. Let's go then to the applications for leave of absence. Councillor Parker has indicated was the 2 dates that he offered us where he was going to be away from the Shire of Esperance. Is there any other councillor wanting to seek leave of absence? If not, are we all happy that Councillor Parker has leave of absence? Thank you, that is carried. Let's move on then to announcements by the person presiding without discussion. So I have nothing to announce at the present time. We go then to declarations of interest, which is item 6.1 on our agenda. Declarations of financial interest. Is any councillor declaring a financial interest on this agenda? Councillor McMullen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to declare a financial interest in item 12.1.6, development application consulting rooms. As it turns out, one of the objectives that has come forward is a landlord for one of my businesses.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations of financial interests? Then we move on to declarations of proximity interests. Any councillor wishing to declare proximity interests? Councillor O'Donnell?
Yes, I would like to declare a proximity interest in 12.2.3, the dog park development, as my property shares a common boundary with the Wild Cherry Park Reserve. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations of proximity? No? We go then to declarations of impartiality interest, councillors. Anyone has a declaration of impartiality? No declarations? Okay, then we move on from there to public question time. This is the opportunity for people to ask a question of council. Are there any questions, any member of the public wish to ask questions of council? Miss Johnson, yeah, that must be done up at the lectern, please, so the recording can get your voice.
Name all.
I'd just like to know, would council consider laying item 12.1.3 on the table for a period of time, please, to give an extra opportunity for greater public consultation, perhaps by way of letters to the landowners regarding this proposed policy change, which could potentially affect them. Also regarding myself personally, to give me an opportunity to gain more clarification regarding some issues that are quite pertinent to these proposed policy changes, please.
Thank you. It's, Councillor, Council will be discussing this item later, Mr Johnson, and they've heard your request, and so you have put that in and they'll give it consideration at that time. Thank you. Are there any other questions to Council, members of the public?
Corey Johnson. I'm just wondering, like, what's our scenario with Shark Lake Industrial Area? Like, I understand we're going further with this windmill project, which is really good. I live near it, so it's quite a large feature. But that's fine. But the scenario with all us people around that area is, as soon as you hit over 6 Mile Hill, there's no range, no service. We got places like, you got all your pony clubs, your go-karts, all this. What are we going to, into the future with this industrial area, are we going to try to, like, my view on it is, we get an NBN tower or a Telstra tower out there, that brings in a fuel station, that brings in mechanics, that brings in trucks, that brings in something to start with this industrial area. I just want to know, my view on it is that we need to look into something like a Telstra tower or an NBN tower out there, and it's a benefit for everything around it. Like, that's what my question to you guys is, what are we looking to do into the future to try to, well, this industrial area is nearly full. Are we going to look at, I know we've got all this set up, but the first thing is it's a Telstra tower. If we get a Telstra tower out there, we're going to be able to, everyone's going to start coming into this area, like actually and using it. Because I just don't see what, right now it's nothing.
Thank you, Mr Johnson. I'll endeavour to answer that question as you've asked it. In regards to the Shark Lake Industrial Park, that land is all available to purchase now. The areas that the Shire controls is all available to purchase now. In regards to the getting a Telstra tower, the Shire doesn't have any say in that at all. We will endeavour to identify black spot areas, and we'll put in requests, but we have no capacity to direct Telstra or the other funding bodies that work with Telstra that they must put in a tower. But we appreciate your point. We know that the signal is weak, and it's weak right out to the airport, and it does need some infill there. There are opportunities to do a small area towers somewhere where we could probably afford to do the input ourselves if we wish to. But the major towers that benefit the greater area there are very expensive, of course. But it's about lobby on Telstra, and it's also about lobby on the funding bodies, the state government and the federal government who are involved with funding those towers. I appreciate your views of what needs to be done, and certainly we are looking to activate that area going forward. Next question, any other questions? Dr Newkirk, I understand you've handed in some questions by email this afternoon, is that correct?
Sent them this morning, yes.
Okay, well I've just been told that they're in today. I understood that probably only this afternoon, but maybe we only saw it this afternoon because I know it's been a very busy day for councillors and our senior management team. But those will be answered for you in that normal format of taking them on notice and then providing you with written answers at the next council meeting.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? No other questions? Okay then, well we'll move into the agenda. So, councillors, we go to public addresses and deputations. Do we have any deputations, Mrs. CEO?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, thank you. We go to petitions. Are there any petitions that have come in? since last meeting?
None received.
Thank you. We go to confirmation of the minutes of the the July council meeting. Councillors, you have had an opportunity to read those minutes. They were sent to you following the July meeting. Is someone prepared to move the adoption of those minutes? So, thank you. It's moved by Councillor O'Bourne. Is there seconded to it? Seconded to Councillor O'Donnell. Is there any speakers against or any questions you might ask on that? I put it to vote. Those in favour, please show. Against, that is carried, 8 votes to nil. We go then to the next item, which is the delegates' reports without discussion. And we have the delegates. Thank you for putting in your reports. Councillor Chambers, did you wish to make any comment to your presentation?
Just as tabled, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We go to Councillor O'Bourne.
As tabled, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Donnell.
As tabled, thank you.
Then we go to Councillor, firstly Councillor Parker. Have you got any?
Nothing to report, thank you.
Councillor Graham.
Yes.
Councillor Pearcey.
As tabled, thank you.
And Councillors, my list is up there for you to read it during your... No,
As tabled.
as tabled. As tabled. McMullen. Did I miss you on the way through? Councillor McMullen. Okay, as tabled, you said?
Yeah.
Thank you. Councillors, you've seen my list up there and they're there for you to read as we go through. Okay, let's move into the agenda as such. And the first item is item 12.1.1, Shire of Esperance Climate Change Declaration. Is there any questions you might have to Mr Henley on this item, first councillors? All your questions answered last week, I take it. Someone prepared to move the recommendation, which is on page 13 of the agenda? Moved by Councillor Pearcey, seconded by Councillor Chambers. It's moved and seconded. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Pearcey?
Well, yes, I would like to speak to it because I'm delighted to be part of a council which is considering this climate change declaration. I'm also delighted that our state and local governments are working diligently towards reducing the impact of human activities on the world. As one of those people who marched on 20th of September 2019, I am absolutely delighted that our advocacy was successful and our local government is considering taking this very welcome step. Climate change is not only real, it is well and truly upon us. We are seeing weather records being broken throughout the world, be they record heat, record cold, record rain or record dry. We are seeing massive disruptions to lives and livelihoods, with even greater disruptions forecast in the near future. Floods, droughts and fires are creating enormous stresses and loss of human lives, along with the even greater loss of already threatened flora and fauna. We cannot delay any longer. Nothing in this declaration contravenes actions we are currently taking and intend to continue taking. It demonstrates clearly that we are acting in the best interests of the community, which is the role of local government. This motion, in my opinion, is without doubt the most important and life-changing motion that has been put to Council during the 4 years I have been an elected member, and I would argue that it's one of the most important that has been introduced in the life of this local government. For these reasons and more, I believe we should wholeheartedly endorse the Climate Change Declaration and look forward to the declaration being signed. Thank you.
Thank you. Seconder, wish to speak to the motion, Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, through the Chair. Yes, I agree wholeheartedly. I think it's a great step forward. I think the Shire already does an enormous amount of work, or has done in the past an enormous amount of work about reducing our footprint. And I think anything that continues to improve that is going to be of a benefit to the community. To live in it as well as economically. There is some fantastic technologies coming on board now, and I think the move towards this is a great step.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against or an amendment to the motion? No speakers against or no amendment. I'll put the motion to vote. Those in favour, please show. Against, that is carried 8 votes to nil. Thank you. We go on to 12.1.2, the local planning scheme number 23, amendment 7. Are there any questions to Mr Henley in regards to this item? No questions? Then is there a mover to the recommendation, which is on page 25? Someone prepared to move the motion? No? Councillor Pearcey?
I move that we pass the officer's recommendation that council, in accordance with regulation 53B of the Planning and Development Local Planning Schemes Regulations 2015, support draft amendment number 7 with the proposed modifications to address issues raised in the submissions 1 through, it's only 1, 2, 3, is it? Yeah. Thank you.
Moved by Councillor Pearcey. Is it seconded?
I thought there was another one at the end.
Seconded by Councillor O'Donnell. Thank you. Councillor Pearcey, do you wish to speak to it?
No, thank you.
Councillor O'Donnell is the seconder. Do you wish to speak to it?
No.
So is there an amendment? My apologies. Is there a speaker against or an amendment coming from the meeting? No speakers against, no amendment. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour. Against, that is carried 8 votes to nil. We move on then to local planning policy. It's 12.1.3, local planning policy, Blue Haven and Second Beach development. That's on item 37 of your agenda. Recommendations on 39. Councillor Oborn.
I believe there's an alternative motion available for us to consider, which I would like to move.
Well, you move the motion, and if we've got the wording up in that, we can deal with it. Yeah, CEO, got some comment?
That Council lay this matter on the table to enable additional consultation in the form of letters to all landowners with policy area, advising of the local planning policy and providing an opportunity to comment.
Okay, Councillor McMullen, you're seconding the motion, so motion's been moved and seconded. Do you wish to speak to it, Councillor Oborn?
Yes, we have been working diligently over the past 2 years to consult as broadly as possible, to not just do the minimum required by law, and this is just another example of doing more than we have to make sure that we've brought the community along with us and make a well-informed decision, because we've got all the information that we need.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor McMullen, you wish to speak to it?
Councillor Oborn just hit the nail on the head. I can't really add to that much further. Thank you.
Councillors, I do recall being told that we should have a date when it lay on, when we might take it off the table. Perhaps if we could add that into the motion of, we've got caretaker period, so I think we'd have to go to the October meeting. Okay, so are the mover willing to add, be lifted from the table or comment, October?
That council lay this matter on the table until the October OCM.
Yes.
Thank you.
Right, and the seconder, happy to add that in October?
Yes, happy with that.
Council meeting? Okay, so we can move on. You wish to speak to it, Councillor? Councillor Oborn?
We've already...
Just, this, what I said before, this is just adding October.
Yeah, I believe that it was, you might wish to, state that further or not. That's fine, I'll take it there. With that motion on the table then, Councillor, it's been moved by Councillor Oborn, seconded by Councillor McMullen. They agree with the wording in it. Is there a speaker against or an amendment? No speaker against, no amendment. I'll put to the vote. Those in favour. Against, that is carried. 8 votes to nil. We then move on, councillors, to item 12.1.4, accommodation in a caravan policy, and the item is on page 50 of the agenda, and the recommendations on page 51. Are there any questions to Mr Henley on this item? Councillor Chambers.
Just through the chair, Mr Henley, how many people are living in caravans in vacant blocks or alongside existing properties in Esperance at the moment?
Through the chair, we don't have a firm number on that at this stage, although we do know during the summer season the numbers do increase dramatically.
Any further questions to Mr Henley? There's no further questions. I'll ask someone if they wish to move a resolution. Mr Henley, you had something to add to that?
Just through the chair, there is an alternative recommendation to fix up a typo in the policy.
There's a typo in the policy. Now let's get this right. Make sure we've got the right wording. Can I have that read, please, the wording?
The council adopt policy EXT new, accommodation in a caravan, subject to clause 1 and 2, being amended by replacing person owns with person who owns.
Okay. Could you explain the reason why the change wording?
Through the chair, I missed the word owns when I drafted the policy, so it's just making it the syntax correct.
Right, okay, so the context is correct on it. So councillors, are there any questions you might have to Mr Henley now? No questions? Okay, so someone prepared to move the motion? Councillor Chambers.
Move the officer's recommendation that council adopt policy EXT new, accommodation in caravans, subject to clause 1 and 2 being amended by replacing the person owns with person who owns.
Thank you. Moved by Councillor Chambers, seconded Councillor Pearcey. So it's moved and seconded. Councillor Chambers, you wish to speak to the motion?
Other than the fact that this helps tidy up some of the areas around town and helps to sort out some issues I know that arise. So it's great to have a policy in place.
Thank you. Councillor Pearcey, you wish to speak as a seconder?
No, thank you.
Thank you. So have two speakers, the mover and the seconder, have had the opportunity to speak. Is there a speaker against the motion? No speakers against, no amendment. I'll put the motion to vote then. Those in favour, please show. Against, that is carried 8-0. We move on then to item 12.1.5, development application oversized outbuilding shed. The item's on page 55 and the recommendation is on page 58. So are there any questions you might have to Mr Henley on this item? Any questions to Mr Henley? No questions to Mr Henley? I take it then you're happy to deal with it, councillors. Is someone prepared to move a motion concerning this item, 12.1.5? Councillor O'Donnell has moved. Is it seconded, Councillor Oborne? Councillor O'Donnell, do you wish to speak to the motion?
No, only to say that there were no objections received in this period, so I can't see a problem with this legislation.
Okay, the seconder was Councillor Oborne. Did you wish to speak to this?
This is consistent with decisions we made in the past. It's a legitimate residential use of the oversized shed for a boat. There are no objections from neighbours, and so it's consistent with decisions we've made previously.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against or an amendment? No speakers against, no amendment. I'll take it you're ready to vote. Those in favour, please show. You're in favour? Councillor Graham?
Yep.
Thank you. It's carried 8-0. Thank you. So that's also that one. We go to 12.1.6 Development Application Consulting Rooms. Items on page 63 and the recommendation is on page 67. Are there any questions you might have for Mr Henley on this item?
I'll just excuse myself
Yes,
for this one.
certainly. Thank you. Councillor McMullen has declared a financial interest in this item and that he has left the room. Are there any questions to Mr Henley? Councillors have done an inspection of this today. Thank you for all councillors being there. Okay, if there's no questions, do we have a recommendation? Councillor Oborne.
Yes, and there's an alternate motion just below there. If we could give our minute secretary a chance to bring that up, please. I'd like to move that.
Just hang on. We would like some explanation of this before we go any further. So any questions to Mr Henley regarding this alternate motion? That's what you're going to move. So I'd like the questions answered now. An explanation of the changes, etc. Is there an understanding of all that? We'll do it in the debate.
I can explain that when I debate, if you like.
Mr Henley, are you familiar with this alternate motion?
Through the chair, I am. Might be worth referring it to the Director of Asset Management regarding some discussions that were held on site.
Okay. So are there any questions to the Director of Asset Management? Yes, Councillor Chambers.
Through the chair, I know this has been put up to look at an alternative parking. In your capacity, do you see an alternative parking arrangement that is suitable to the site?
Through the chair, it's very unlikely that more additional parking can be accommodated in the front of that property, given that Dempster Street's got 8,000 vehicles a day through that. You would want forward-facing or forward-exiting manoeuvres, so that fairly much rules out trying to park cars in perpendicular or 90 degrees. So I wouldn't be recommending from a road safety aspect to be looking at an option to reverse out onto Dempster Street. It would be a massive safety concern, and it's not something I could honestly recommend to council that we should even entertain.
Thank you. Is there any other questions you might have to Mr Walker? Councillor Graham?
Well, I guess I'll just add to that. Do you think there's capability of to have that paved so that they can pull in and drive out frontwards? Is there a possibility of that design being suitable there?
The problem with that is then they're over road reserve, so it's not contained within their property, so council would have to agree that they actually maintain that and construct that on the road reserve. The problem with that is you've got a footpath that runs straight through that as well, so you've got the added complexity of trying to, I guess, have safe pedestrian movements through that area that can't easily be accommodated if you're trying to have cars turn around in that area.
Is there any further questions you might have to Mr Walker or Mr Henley? Mr Henley, a question from myself in regards to the numbers of car parks what we've asked for in that for that business. Can you give us an explanation why it's so high for what appears to be a low use business?
Through the chair, the parking requirement is outlined in the scheme for the land use. That requires a number of bays based on a number of practitioners and staff, which is how you end up with the parking calculation that's been provided for.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Pearcey?
Is there room for us to amend that?
Through the chair, council can vary that provision if they so wish.
Right, okay. I understand, Mr Henley, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand if they'd applied for a medical centre, it wouldn't have been as high. Is that right or not?
Through the chair, if they applied for a medical centre, it wouldn't have been advertised.
It would have been advertised.
It wouldn't have been advertised
Wouldn't have
because it's of the additional use on the site. It makes it a discretionary land use. It's just that because consulting room falls under the residential zoning and isn't in the additional use, incidentally, that has been resolved in Amendment 7 that's just been considered, which makes that also a discretionary land use within this zone.
Thank you. Any other questions you might have to Mr Henley on this one? Councillor Pearcey?
So let me get this clear. Under the new amendment, this would just have automatically been granted if it all fitted.
Through the chair, if it met the development standards, it would have been approved under delegated authority without referral to anyone.
And when does these amendments? It will be some time before they come into play.
Through the chair, this amendment is probably still 4 to 6 months away from being gazetted. It's the last time through council, but it's got a process through the planning commission to go through.
Right, thank you. Well, I think we've got a little bit better understanding of it. So we got, Councillor O'Bourne, you indicated you wish to move this alternate motion. Okay.
I move the motion that council lay this matter on the table until the October ordinary council meeting to enable alternative parking arrangements to be formulated by the proponent.
Okay, so Councillor O'Bourne has moved the amendment. Is someone prepared to second the amendment? Moved by Councillor Chambers, seconded by Councillor Chambers, I correctly should say. Councillor O'Bourne, you speak to your motion.
This has been a contentious proposal because of multiple objections from neighbours, and I feel I want to support both the proponent and the neighbours to find a win-win rather than having to have a win-lose. The proponent has suggested that they are prepared to not let this be voted on today, to go back to their consultant to try to rationalise the parking in a way that able-bodied people come off Dempster Street and leave in a forward-facing motion, even if it's only 1 or 2 bays, which I think we can do because currently their plan suggests an Ackroyd parking bay, which is 1 bay, and then the second bay that's marked out with the bollard. So if we could just swap that out for 2 able-bodied car bays, the staff and the vulnerable clients can use the easement, which is more in line, in my opinion, with the original transfer of the easement agreement, which was that small amounts of people were going to use that easement with a minimum of fuss to the person who actually owns the land. I don't think it's right to take someone's land off them and use them in a way that they don't wish for their own land to be used, and I'm very grateful the proponent wants to work so hard to find middle ground on this, and the neighbours are actually happy with this as well. So if the consultant can come up with a good plan, this is a win-win that both sides of the party agree to.
Thank you. Councillor Chambers, you second the motion. I'll give you the right to...
The reason that I seconded the motion was I haven't heard a definitive no that you can't alter the parking at the front of the premises, or you can't reduce the required amount of parking at the premises. So I think this is an avenue that can still be developed or still be looked at. So in my view, it's probably a little more clinical, is the fact that I don't believe that all the options have yet been expended.
Thank you. So we've had 2 speakers there. Is there a speaker against? Councillor Pearcey?
I'm too short. I just don't feel that it's worthwhile for us to wait for parking information, because we've already been told it's unlikely. Well, when Mr Hindley says it's unlikely, that's a very strong statement from him. He doesn't say things very lightly. And for people to reverse out into that road, which is quite a busy road, and especially in summer, I think it's a little bit too dangerous, and we're taking a large risk if we try to enforce that. The easement was proclaimed before the property was built, so the owner always knew that there was a possibility that it could be used as often as the next door neighbours desired. So no, I'm not happy about laying it on the table.
Okay. Speaker in favour of the motion. It's written up there as an amendment, but that's the substantive motion to my knowledge. Yeah, that's the way thank you. So there's been a speaker against. Is there a speaker in favour of the motion? Lay it on the table. Speaker against? No other speakers? There's been a speaker against the motion, so Councillor Oborne, I'll give you the opportunity to write a reply.
Thank you. I think Councillor Pearcey misunderstood me because I did quite clearly say that the consultant was to design parking that enabled exit of the vehicles onto Dempster Street in a forward-facing motion. So we're aware that that's a double-laned busy road. If you can get one car out that way with an Ackroyd bay, I'm sure he can come up with 2 cars leaving in a forward-facing motion. There's only 2 practitioners, and if some of them have disabilities and will be using the back easement, then I think we can amend our own planning. If it can be done in a safe way, then this is a decision that we're actually elected to make, and I'd like to be able to make that decision on behalf of my community.
Thank you. That closes the debate. Councillors, I put the alternate motion to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Against? The motion is carried 6 votes to 1. Call Councillor McMullen back into the chamber, please. Councillor, for your benefit, the motion that was carried was to lay it on the table and have another look at the parking on that one. Let's move on, councillors. We go into the asset management area, and it's item 12.2.1, Esperance Tanker Jetty Timber Policy, and that is on page 81 of our agenda. Are there any questions to Mr. Walker? Any questions? No questions? Is someone prepared to move the motion? Councillor Graham.
Anything Jetty. I move the council adopt the policy ASS new of the Esperance Tanker Jetty timber. 2, all proceeds from the sale of the Esperance Tanker Jetty timber to go to the Jetty Reserve. 3, create a new class of fees for the Esperance Tanker Jetty timber grade 3 as follows. This is quite difficult. And as A for $50 GST for deck plank, single stringers to $300 GST inclusive, double stringers to $600 GST inclusive, and half cap at $300 GST inclusive. And 4, to give public notice of the new fees for these jetty timbers grade 3, I won't read it again, identifying that they will commence from 30th of August 2021.
It's been moved by Councillor Graham. Is someone prepared to second that motion? Seconded by Councillor Parker. Moved and seconded. Councillor Graham.
Look, it's good to get to a point where we can start to distribute some of these timbers to the public. It's been a long 85-year history, I think, or whatever it is now, and it's I think it's good, and we've put fair values on it so that the public are able to come and get a little bit of the history of the great town of Esperance. Thank you.
Councillor Parker, did you wish to speak to the motion? Is there a speaker against? Any speakers against? Or an amendment? No speakers against, no amendment. I'll put the motion to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Against, that is carried 8 votes to 0. We move on then to item 12.2.2, the St Germain Avenue traffic, and the items on page 88 with a recommendation on page 91. Councillors, you'll remember this, we had a petition brought into us by the residents on that road, and here's the answers, and I understand it's been discussed with that community on that road extensively. Are there any questions you might have to Mr Walker concerning it? No questions? And is someone prepared to move the recommendation? Councillor Chambers has moved.
I move that the council request the Chief Executive Officer to develop the St Germain Avenue traffic calming concepts in consultation with the affected abutting residents for future budget consideration, and to request Main Roads to consider installing a 50 km/h sign at the entry to St Germain Avenue from Goldfields Road.
It's been moved by Councillor Chambers. It's seconded by Councillor Piercy. Councillor Chambers.
I think it's a wonderful opportunity to continue to improve the safety on our roads. Obviously this is an issue that concerns the neighbours enough for them to organise a petition to get people to bring it to council and have a look at, and I think it gives the opportunity to also be able to trial some stuff that will hopefully work on other parts of town.
Thank you. Councillor Piercy, you wish to speak to this?
I think it's a great example of council listening to the community, and I think it's a great idea. Thank you.
Is there a speaker against the motion? No speakers against the motion. Is there an amendment to the motion? I put the motion to vote. Those in favour, please show. Against, that is carried. 8 votes to 0. We go to item 12.2.2, my apologies, 12.2.3, dog park development, and I know that Councillor O'Donnell has declared a proximity interest, and she's leaving the chamber. Do we have any questions to Mr Walker on this item? No questions? Someone prepared to move the motion? Councillor McMullen.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I'd like to move the officer's recommendation that Council 1, note the community feedback received on future dog park development, and 2, request the Chief Executive Officer to A, develop a detailed design and implement a primary dog park at Wild Cherry Park Reserve, and B, develop a detailed design for a dog park at the Greater Sports Ground Reserve in line with the Greater Sports Ground Reserve Master Plan, future budget consideration.
Been moved by Councillor McMullen. Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor O'Brien has seconded the motion. Councillor McMullen.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I think I've been quite vocal about this one for some time. I've been very passionate about getting a dog park built for the Shire of Esperance. A dog park is not just a place where dogs are welcome, but a dog park is a place where dogs are invited. It is built for them. So it's not like the beach where you can take your dog there, but it's primarily for a public and recreational use. A dog park creates a place that you can safely exercise your dog. It's enclosed. It's not going to run across the road or down chasing cars. Having been to numerous dog parks outside of Esperance as well, I can tell you right now they are just a hive of activity. the social connectivity that it can create, not just for the dogs itself, but also for the two-leggers as well. It's going to create less user group conflict for organisations within the greater sports ground as well, as we hope that a lot of dog walkers and people that like to exercise their dogs will make great use of this as well. And I'd also like to point out that it actually, it's a two birds, one stone approach as well, because obviously the area at the Wild Cherry Reserve, it's a bit of a it's a little bit of a swampy eyesore at times as well. It's not level. In doing this dog park development, we can clear the sand dunes on the John Street, Ocean Street area. We can open up a lot of that land for future development. It's already there, it's already subdivided, there's just no roads, no services, because we got 20 metres of sand dune sitting atop of it. So it's going to kill two birds with one stone. We're going to get a fantastic asset out in the Castletown area near Wild Cherry, and it's going to clear up some prime real estate very close to the CBD that could actually be developed in the future as a byproduct of this dog park. And I absolutely urge all of council to please support this motion.
Seconder to the motion was Councillor Oborne. You wish to speak to the motion?
I couldn't say it any better than that, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is there a speaker against the motion? Or an amendment? Any amendments? No speakers against, no amendment. I'll put to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Against? That is carried 7 votes to nil. Call Councillor O'Donnell back into the chamber, please. Councillor O'Donnell, the outcome from that item was that the council carried 7 votes to nil in favour of the recommendation as put forward for the development. Yep. Okay. Councillors, we move on to item 12.2.4, Building Asset Management Plan. The item's on page 124 and it is recommendation is on page 126. Are there any questions to Mr. Walker concerning this management plan? No questions? Someone prepared to move the motion? Move, Councillor Chambers. Seconded? Councillor Graham. Moved by Councillor Chambers, seconded Councillor Graham. Councillor Chambers.
I move that the officer's recommendation that council endorse the Building Asset Management Plan 2021. And do you want to speak to it?
Okay, so I've got a mover and a seconder. So Councillor, Councillor Chambers, would you speak to your motion?
It's a very lengthy report. I'd like to thank the staff for compiling it. It certainly gives us a very good overview of the building assets and where we're at exactly with where they are and what we need to do to maintain those assets, and certainly what the cost will be in the future to make sure that we continue to supply and ensure that the assets are not mismanaged or lost to the community.
Thank you. Councillor Graham, I think you were the seconder.
Yeah, nothing to add. Just support that, sure.
Is there a speaker against, councillors, or an amendment? Put it to the vote. Those in favour? Against, that is carried. We then move on to the Intercorporate and Community Services, the Financial Services Report, which is on page 150. Are there any questions to Mrs. Baxter on this item? No questions? Someone prepared to move the adoption? Moved by Councillor Pearcey, seconded. Councillor Chambers. Councillor Pearcey, you can speak to the motion.
No, thank you.
Councillor Chambers, do you wish to make a comment?
No, thank you.
Is there a speaker against the motion or an amendment? No speakers against or no amendment. I'll put to the vote those in favour. That is carried 8 votes to nil. Thank you. We then move on to item 12.3.2, the licensed area adjustment, Esperance Mountain Bike Association. Items on page 202. Are there any questions to Mrs. Baxter? Oh, Mr. Walker concerning this item. I think Mr. Walker's area. Are there any questions you might have? No questions? Someone prepared to move the motion? Councillor Oborne, seconder. Councillor Pearcey, Councillor Oborne.
I move the officer's recommendation as tabled.
Did you wish to speak to it?
Just to say that, as explained in the agenda briefing, this was a simple administrative correction.
Thank you. Councillor Pearcey?
No, thank you.
So it's moved and seconded. We've had speakers. Is there a speaker against? No speaker against? Is there an amendment? Put to the vote. Those in favour? Against? That is carried 8 votes to nil. We move on to executive services now. We've got item 12.4.1, the Prevent Support Health campaign. The item is on page 208 of the agenda. Recommendations on 209. Is there any questions to Mrs. Baxter on this item? No questions? Someone prepared to move the motion? Councillor O'Donnell.
I move the motion. That council formally in support of the Prevent Support Heal campaign. 2, acknowledges the important role prevention programs and non-clinical community mental health organisations play in caring for people with mental health challenges, particularly through the COVID pandemic. And 3, request the CEO to A, write to the Minister for Mental Health, the Honourable Stephen Dawson, MLC, agreeing with ethos of the campaign, outlining how an increase in mental health prevention and support would benefit the Esperance community. B, promote the campaign through various communication channels. And C, explore ways that the state government can support local government to care for their community mental health.
Thank you. That's the motion. Is there a seconder to the motion? Second to the motion, Councillor Pearcey. It's moved and seconded. Councillor O'Donnell, do you wish to speak to this item?
I do. Thank you, Mr. President. I would like to thank the CEO and the staff for putting this on the agenda. The Prevent Support Health campaign was launched by the Western Australian Association for Mental Health. At the moment, it's running a project called the 1,000 Flowers. It's gathering 1,000 stories from affected families in WA that their loved ones that are affected by mental health. The flower looks like this on the web page. You can download. It's a digital flower. You can add your family story to it. 1 in 5 are affected by mental health issues in their lifetime. The theme this year is mental health starts with our children. We need to break the stigma barriers associated with mental health issues. Mental Health Week is on the 9th, from the 9th to the 16th of October. By supporting this motion, we will help our Esperance community. The $129.9 million youth package has been announced last week, but it needs to focus on preventing mental health issues in the first place. Last year's budget allocated less than 1% to prevention, which is 6 times less than the government's own targets. My firm belief is prevention in early intervention and support pathways for young people's recovery are the best ways forward for the health and well-being of everyone with a mental health challenge. Please vote in favour of this motion.
Thank you. The second, I wish to speak to the motion. Councillor Pearcey.
Well, this morning, up until 3 o'clock, I attended a workshop on counselling for the bereaved and mainly to do with suicide, which of course is through mental health. And it's not just the people who are affected, it is those around them. As the flower shows, it is those around them. And those numbers are enormous, so I think this is a vital project. Thank you.
Thank you. Two speakers in favour. Is a speaker against or an amendment? No speakers against, no amendment. It's ready to vote. Those in favour? Against, that's carried 8 votes to nil. Thank you. We then move on to the item 12.4.2, the information bulletin. It is on page 210. Recommendations is on the same page. Are there any questions here to Mrs. Baxter? So councillors, no questions? Someone prepared to move the officer's recommendation? Moved by Councillor Chambers, seconded by Councillor O'Donnell. Councillor Chambers, you can speak to it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, thank you very much for this informative report. Part of it was the handover of the dog park, animal facility that was now at the depot, which the council went and had a look at prior to the meeting today. I'd like to commend everyone that was involved in that. It's a fantastic facility. I think they'll possibly have a problem getting rid of the dogs, not so much keeping them out of it, I think so.
Thank you. The seconder wish to speak?
No, thank you.
Okay, then is there a speaker against or an amendment? No speakers against, no amendment. I put to the vote. Those in favour? Against, that's carried 8-0. I'd just like to compliment the staff once again for a great report. I mean, I think it's a lot of detail in it, and it's very, very well done by our staff to keep us fully informed. We move on then, councillors, to the item 12.4.3, the elected members' social media policy. Is there any, this item is on page 242. Are there any questions to Mrs. Baxter on this? No questions? Then ask if there's a mover of the motion. Moved by Councillor Oborne, seconded. Councillor McMullen, it's moved and seconded. Sorry, I took my eye away from there. Councillor Oborne, will you wish to read the recommendation, please?
I move the officer's recommendation that council adopt policy EXE new elected member social media.
Thank you. And so, would you wish to speak to the motion now?
Yes, I think social media has an important role to play in communicating with our community. It's a case in point is how we're live streaming right now, and you can broadly reach lots of people, get information out there quickly. It's accessible, it's transparent. Communication is two ways, so we can issue a simple media release and tell people what we want them to hear, but a social media post allows people to respond and you can get feedback in a timely fashion. That being said, it has risks, as we all know, and so I appreciate the guidance of the staff in preparing this policy to help us to use it effectively as a tool and to meet our community's expectations.
Thank you. The seconder wish to speak to it at this stage?
No, thank you.
Okay, so there's been two speakers, the mover and the seconder had a chance to speak. Is there a speaker against the motion? No speakers against. No. Is there an amendment? No amendment. I'll put to the vote. Those in favour. Against it. That is carried. 8 votes to nil. Thank you. We then move on to minutes of the committees. Committee reports on page 247. Any questions you might have? Once again, Mrs. Baxter. Any questions? Somebody prepared to move the motion then? Councillor O'Donnell. Do you wish to read the motion?
Audit Committee, 9th of August 2021.
Been moved by Councillor O'Donnell, it's a seconder to the motion. Councillor McMullen, do you wish to speak to it, Councillor O'Donnell? Councillor McMullen, do you wish to speak?
No, thank you.
So there's no speakers in favour at this stage, they've happy with it. Is there a speaker against or an amendment? No speakers against, no amendment. I put it to the vote. Those in favour, please show. Against, that is carried 8-0. We go then to the interim audit management letter, page 258. Are there any questions to Mrs. Baxter concerning this item? No questions? If there's no questions, someone prepared to move the motion? So there's a question, is it? Sorry? You're moving the motion. Thank you. Councillor Pearce.
I move that council note the matters raised in the interim audit management letter and endorse the recommendations to reduce the risk.
Thank you. Is there a second? Is there a seconder to the motion? Councillor O'Born. You wish to speak to it, Councillor?
No, thank you.
Councillor O'Born, as a seconder, do you wish to speak to it?
Yes, please, Mr. President. Sitting on the audit committee, I just wanted to reassure councillors that the Shire of Esperance payroll is handled meticulously, and some of these recommendations are just a balance between best practice and efficiency. And Ken Mills, who sits on that committee with us, was satisfied that these are good recommendations, and we'll make sure that we're doing things to the best of our ability.
Thank you. Let's move on the seconder. Is there a speaker against or an amendment? No speakers against. I'll put it to the vote. Those in favour? Against? That's carried 8-0. Okay, now we move to item 14 on the agenda. Motions of which notice has been given. Do we have any items? No. Mr. CEO? Okay. Item 15 is members' questions with or without notice. Are there any members' questions that they wish to ask? Not. We move on then to urgent business approved by decision. Do we have any items to be dealt with in urgent business?
No items, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. So that concludes this part of the agenda. We do have matters behind closed doors, 7 items to deal with there, but in my generosity, I will open the public question time if there's any members of the public who might have a question to ask. Dr. Newkirk.
Thank you. There were 2 items actually that came up in the meeting that I actually, now that they've been passed, have questions on. First one is to do with item 12.1.1, climate change declaration on page 11. And I note the declaration, as mentioned by the council members here, states a laudable intent. My question is that when can we expect council to set actual targets to reach a zero emission? Because the intent is there, but there's no targets, and the obvious one that we recognise is a zero emission. So when would we expect to have a date that council will have that?
Dr. Newkirk, that's a challenge, but we know we have to change a lot of the practices we are doing as we go forward. We know there's a whole list in this report of things that we can take up and do. We also have a very enthusiastic young group of people, and I suspect on the phone calls I've had over the last week, and many other councillors would have had similar phone calls, I think there's a lot of people out in the community are keen to work with us, give us some ideas, give us some help. When will we have a target is what we need to define going forward. And I'm not going to commit to a date here now. I don't think it's fair to my fellow councillors that we cannot commit to a target where we'll get to zero. But we would hope, having assessed and planned and put in place what we need, I would hope that we can achieve an answer to your question within 12 months. Maybe it's a bit longer. I don't know. We've got an election coming, and I'm not sure what might be the attitude or the wisdom that is brought to us in a new council. But I would hope that we can meet a target that you're asking us to meet within that period of time.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I appreciate that it's a difficult thing to do, and if you can set, say, a period of 12 months to actually come to a date, I think it's excellent. The other question I have is related to the Jetty timber policy, and again, I needed to hear the discussion here and the decision from council to make this question. I note on page 81 there is the motion that council had that they requested the CEO to develop a process for potential users of the timber, right? That was really the question that council put to Shire. And I note that in the policy that you have accepted today, it says on page 84, the Shire of Esperance project, the Shire of Esperance internally may use any grades and quantity of Esperance tanker jetty timber for any public projects. And my question really is, when can we expect Shire to actually use timber other than for road signs, what we have seen?
Okay, thank you for the question, Dr. Newkirk. We are retaining timbers for a variety of different reasons that we might want to use them on. And if you have studied the documents concerning the James Street precinct, you would see there's lots of areas there where we might want to show heritage, and these timbers would be very, very valuable in the works that we might put in place. Not just street signs, as you are inferring that we might have wasted timber on. No, I'm pleased to know that, because our signs are very well done by our staff. But we believe there'll be a lot of places we might want to use it, so we want to retain a significant amount of the timber for those sites going forward. And I would see, personally, we haven't had a debate over where it might be required, but I think the James Street precinct, there'll be a lot of work done in that area. We've had a huge amount of community comment come in on through our processes there. We've had lots and lots of very, very good ideas, and anywhere where we want to put in heritage type activities, I'm sure that those timbers will fit most, they'll be most fitting in those sorts of projects. The other point that I would make about it is that if we sold them all off in the next 6 months for money and we wouldn't have access to that, that would be a bad decision.
Okay, we will wait the discussion on the James Street precinct when the council has the final version of the plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? Mr. O'Dwyer, you wish to come up and ask questions?
Yeah, a very simple one, Mr. President. I asked some questions in relation to that land clearing thing here at the last meeting. I was asked to be here today to get a copy of the report as to the proceedings that went on. You asked me to be here, and I saw you during the week, and you said it might be a little bit late getting to me. I'd just like an official answer here at the meeting, so I can sit on that.
Hey, well, could I say to you, and I think I'd suggested before, that might take some time. The report has been finished. It goes to the local government insurance board who run our insurances for the Shire of Esperance. It then has to go to their legal firm that they deal with, because they were the people that managed that through the court process, and I would hope that we'll see come out of that system somewhere in the course of the next week or two, but it's not available today.
Or just, so I don't have to come to the meetings where it's not going to be said. If and when it does come, can I be notified by mail or a phone call or something, and then I will attend that meeting?
Well, no, I'll make sure that you get a copy supplied to you, because you've asked the question for it.
All right then. Okay, thank you.
And it would be in the agenda, in the minutes of a meeting anyway, because it has to be provided as a public answer.
Yeah. It's not a drama. I just want that answer to pass on to the relevant authority that asked me about it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other members of the public who have a question for council? Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we've still got business to do. 7 items that are held under a behind closed doors policy process, and we'll be moving into those now. And could I put an apology into Emily Smith, because I didn't see you come in, Emily. You've obviously moved in just a fraction after we started the meeting. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate that. Yeah, okay, it's been moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor McMullen, that we go behind closed doors.
Too late, we're behind closed doors.
There's no need to debate the matter, is it?
No.
Those in favour, please show. Against, that. Favour? That's carried 8-0. So we open the door. Okay, so if I need to read any of these resolutions out, I will, but I don't have to. Okay. All right, councillors, thank you very much for your commitment to the meeting tonight and the work that's been done to get outcomes with the majority of motions. We do have 2 that we've passed on, but I think we have our wisdom to get things right before we move a motion is certainly fits with my thinking, and I'm pleased that you've gone down that line with those 2 subjects, and I'm sure that we'll find some answers as we go forward. And so from that point, I'll declare the meeting closed.